mean then, James, McTominay, what's the situation with him at the moment? Is he staying at Manchester United? Because there was interest there, wasn't there?
Yeah, we definitely want to go into Fulham, it seems.
Right,
Now, Fulham having 2 bids turned down, and in the last few days we reported that the Fulham were weighing up to go back in with a 3rd bid or not. That doesn't seem to be the case. So, as things stand, Scott McTominay will remain a Manchester United player beyond the end of this transfer window. United may therefore need to be creative when it comes to potential incomings in that area. But United have always been very consistent on their stance, McTominay. They've always been very relaxed about his situation. Ten Hag has always backed the player, I think. But crucially here, they need sales to be able to fund a potential move. Osman, potentially if he departs, maybe they could come in for him in the final days of the window. He did feature against Fulham on Friday night, got 6 minutes off the bench. He is into the final year of his contract, but I think United are very relaxed about the situation. They don't see him leaving for free next summer because they retain that crucial option to extend his contract by another year. OK, so, Michael, are they still in the business for a midfielder, Manchester United?
Yeah, I think Erik ten Hag's been quite clear. I think I've done some pretty good business so far, but he's openly said in press conferences they're not done yet, and I think most managers can say they're not done yet with the transfer window still open. And I think it's the midfield. They're really looking to strengthen the position. Central midfield, and the player we're hearing all the time is Manuel Ugarte from PSG. What we've learnt today is that both clubs would prefer a permanent move over preferably over a loan. If we remember last season, they brought in Sofian Amrabat on a loan from Fiorentina, but they're both exploring the permanent option. That's what they both prefer. So if there's an agreement there might be that hope that they can push on with this and get this sorted before transfer deadline day.
You were nodding there, David. Is that something that United need, you feel? And is he the player that they should get?
I think he's a very good player.
OK.
I think he could give them some good balance because they got Casemiro and Kobe Manu, and I think if you bring someone like him, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can either play with them three midfield together. It gives maybe Kobe a little bit more licence to roam. Yeah. Because he's got that defensive knack as well. So I think he could be a good signing. Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at Casemiro because I think a lot of people might have thought that he might have moved on, but actually he looks like he's reinventing himself somewhat, isn't he, in that midfield? OK, let's move
west. Right, let's get to Manchester United. It could be a busy week for them as well. A number of European clubs are exploring a potential deal for forward Jadon Sancho. As it stands, he will stay at United, but this new interest makes Sancho definitely one to watch in the final 10 days of the window. Dan, given the history with Erik ten Hag, with the club, do you think a move, if one comes up, a move to a big European club would make the most sense for him?
I think regardless, once the window closes, I think that can be really the next chapter for Jadon Sancho, whether that's at Manchester United or another club, because while the window's open, it is quite easy to have this narrative around what happened with Ten Hag last season, and of course he was so good at Borussia Dortmund in spells last season as well, whereas when the window closes, at least he can finally move on, whether that's at United with the 4 other wingers who were there, the likes of Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, Anthony Ahmad as well, but he can also play in the false 9 position, so there definitely is space for him at United. I think the question is who is out there in Europe who really needs that winger. You look at PSG, they signed someone in this week, so they've potentially cooled their interest in Sancho. You look who else is out there in Europe. There doesn't seem a natural fit at the moment, so I think he's best off trying to get his way back into that United side. And I think there'd be nothing more than the fans at Old Trafford wanting to see Sancho succeed. It's just whether he's given the opportunity and whether he can really work his way into the system, I think.
I just can't see where he fits at the moment. It's good that they buried the hatchet and that he's not training with the kids and not allowed into the complex, things like that. Nobody wants to see stuff like that happening. But there's a lot of barriers to him getting into that Manchester United team. We saw he wasn't in the squad on Friday. Obviously, that was a little bit to do with illness. But now he's out that squad. So for him to get back in, someone's got to come out, and I don't see who that is. And people are talking about like the false 9 position as a fail-safe. Manchester United have got 2 recognised centre-forwards now that will want game time. I don't really see that as a viable option. The right-hand side looks like Ahmed's really made a play for that position to make that his own. They've got Anthony, who cost a lot of money there as well. On the other side, you've got Rashford and Garnacho, both their best football. So I think probably rules that position out. Number 10, Fernandes and Mount. So I don't, although we're saying Sancho can play in all these positions, I don't see at Manchester United when he's going to play in those positions with all those options.
Why do you think there's been no Premier League clubs associated with him in the last few days? We're just hearing that there might be some interest from European clubs.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the interesting thing is, it's what does Jadon Sancho want? You know, does he want to be playing football, which you would imagine wants to play every week? But then you look at the other clubs in the Premier League. You know, unless you looked at Arsenal, for example, you know they're very settled with likes of Trossard, Saka, Martinelli. Tottenham have a wealth of wingers as well. Likewise, in Manchester City. So it doesn't seem that Jadon Sancho will want to be playing the highest level possible European football. And I think when you look in the Premier League, there's maybe, I mean, you might say Aston Villa, but maybe there's not perhaps a natural fit, and maybe he's best off just working his way into that United side. Strength and depth. These teams are now playing over 60 games a season. I think we need to get away from 2, 3 players enough. These teams need strength and depth, and he'll get opportunities this season, I think.
I guess wage and transfer fee would be the barriers for Premier League clubs, but then we know that the Premier League's the league that carries the most amount of money. So if it's a barrier for Premier League clubs, it's probably going to be a barrier for clubs outside of the Premier League as well. I think in an ideal world, he probably would have moved to Dortmund, but Dortmund, although they facilitated the loan deal in the second half of last season, the way they operate as a club fundamentally, they're not going to pay the kind of transfer fee that Sancho is going to command, and they're not going to be able to afford the wages. So again, it kind of leaves a player stuck, because I think the ideal place for him to play his football now would be Dortmund, because we saw what he did in the Champions League last season.
OK, in terms of midfield, Man United have been looking for a midfielder for much of this window, and Manuel Ugarte remains a live option. Talks continue with Paris Saint-Germain over his signing. As it stands, Scott McTominay will remain at Old Trafford, and as a result, Manchester United may have to be creative when it comes to potential incomings. I mean, we've spoken about midfielders, central midfielders in Man United for the last couple of weeks, and the fact that we've come up with so many different names, I mean, now it seems like Ugarte is in pole position. He's the one they've zeroed in on. But the fact that we've mentioned so many names, does that suggest that there isn't an obvious option to improve the midfield?
Yeah, I think it depends what angle you look at this, because actually you could look at maybe half cup full in terms of actually Manchester United under Ineos. I think when you've looked at who they've signed this year, they really have had alternative options for each signing they've made, which actually, perhaps compared to previous windows, they've had one target and pursued that one target all window. So I think actually having different options for midfield could be positive. I think Ugarte would make a lot of sense. He's a bit younger. They need a number 6, I think, to really give Manu a bit of a break, but also rotate in and out with Casemiro as well. So I think he would be a natural fit. He's tenacious, he can play with the ball, and he's happy to put a tackle in as well. So perhaps it just alleviates the pressure off Casemiro a little bit, and also doesn't put as much pressure on Manu as well at just 19 years old.
OK. In Paris for us. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks very much for having a chat. Let's get right into it. We've just been talking about Manuel Ugarte. We seem to have been talking about him for most of the month in terms of possibly going to Manchester United. Is there growing optimism now that a deal can be done between PSG and Man U?
Well, certainly there's still a feeling that PSG can and will let Ugarte go if a deal can possibly be reached with United. The main stumbling block this summer has been the fact that the two clubs' valuation of the player, it has been quite some way apart. But Ugarte wasn't involved in PSG's opening game of the season last week, so there is still a feeling that he is one of the players that the French champions will look to move on before the end of this transfer window. Obviously, a player that United remain interested in, and the dialogue has never really broken up between United and PSG this summer, given PSG's interest in Jadon Sancho as well.
Hi, Jonathan. Afternoon. Just on the theme of Manchester United, I mean, do PSG still want Jadon Sancho, or do you think they'll be looking elsewhere, or do you think they'll be happy with their squad?
I think the situation has changed a little bit after the opening game of the season. Gonzalo Ramos picking up an injury that's probably going to keep him out for a couple of months as opposed to a couple of weeks. And that now has prompted a bit of a rejig in terms of PSG's thinking. Are they still interested in Jadon Sancho's profile? Yes, he's a player they identified at the beginning of the summer who could possibly, fill their needs in the squad, and give them a real sort of right-sided presence in the attack. However, with this injury to Ramos, that means that there's no real possibility of moving Randall Colomwani on between now and the end of the transfer window, so they'll stick with him in the middle and now possibly look for somebody who might be a little more complementary. So the name Ademola Lookman of Atalanta has surfaced in recent days, and there's now speculation that he perhaps has moved slightly ahead of Sancho in PSG's pecking order.
Hi, Jonathan. Sticking with PSG, Carlos Soler is in talks with, West Ham are in talks with PSG to sign Carlos Soler at the moment. What would he bring to their midfield? They've obviously improved their midfield already this summer. Where would he fit into West Ham?
Yeah, Soler's a really interesting one because he's got quite a versatile profile. He's certainly played a number of positions since he joined PSG a couple of years ago. Unused substitute last week in PSG's opening game, but he did make the matchday squad. So I think there is a feeling that Luis Enrique could still use if he doesn't end up doing. However, Soler, in terms of what was expected from him at the very beginning of his time with PSG, I think many people expected him to be a very creative presence. He's been a bit more workmanlike than that, but that's also because of the way that he's been deployed by a number of different coaches. And I think West Ham would be getting somebody who is potentially a very creative player, if everybody remembers him at his best in Valencia back in La Liga. A really superb player, and many people felt that PSG were getting an absolute bargain back then. And although he has proved to be decent value in the fact that he could fit in a number of different positions, whether it's a more central midfield role, whether it's even a fullback or wingback at times, he is somebody who has added value to the squad. So I think the Hammers will be getting a very interesting type of player who could potentially fill a number of needs.
Moving on to Everton, there are reports linking Neil Maupay with a move away. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, bad news for Marseille with a serious injury in the attacking ranks to Mubanya. So that means that Marseille will now be looking to make an attacking reinforcement. And Maupay has been sort of suggested as a bit of a low-cost approach, given that this has been quite a busy transfer window for Marseille so far. But they hit the ground running under Roberto De Zerbi in their opening game, really blowing out last season's surprise package Brest. And there has also been speculation that they're making a move on Norwich's Jonathan Rowe. That speculation isn't anything new. It's been around for a couple of weeks now, and it feels like Rowe is perhaps the main priority for Marseille at this moment in time, with Maupay possibly being the player that they pivot to if it continues to be problematic for the Norwich man.
Jonathan, we saw Tottenham in action last night, first Monday night football of the season. Just wondering, with a few weeks left to go of the window, could there be one more incoming, do you think, for Spurs?
Yeah, there's a name that's certainly started to surface over here in France, and that's Monaco's Van der Sar, primarily a right-back, right-wing-back. So definitely one to watch between now and the end of the window. Whether or not Monaco would feel that they can move him on and potentially move for somebody else to sort of fill in, that remains to be seen. But he's definitely a player that Monaco sort of wouldn't stand in the way of leaving if a suitable offer did arrive from the likes of the Tottenham.
Finally, Jonathan, just a quick word on Thierry Henry. He has resigned as the France under-21 boss. Why is that? Is there another move potentially on the cards?
Yeah, this one's a curious one because obviously he hasn't been in the position, or hadn't been in the position, for a terribly long time, although there was always a feeling that it was very much an appointment made for the Olympic Games, and he took the French team all the way to the final. They ended up as silver medalists, of course. There was speculation as well linking Henry with the USMNT, the US men's national team position. So that is something that has died off a little bit, obviously, since the Mauricio Pochettino taking that position has cropped up on the radar. So there is now a feeling that perhaps with his reputation at managerial level restored a little bit, that Henry could be perhaps looking at a return to the club game. But there was always a feeling, I think, that with Zinedine Zidane the obvious choice to replace Didier Deschamps at the head of the French national team after the 2026 World Cup cycle, that this was one for Henry to potentially get himself back into the managerial game and possibly put himself back on the market after the Olympics, which now seems to be the case.
Great stuff, very informative as ever. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Manchester United fans have become well acquainted with the name Manuel Ugarte this summer transfer window. The club have been monitoring the 23-year-old for several weeks, only to cool interest in the player after Paris Saint-Germain set an asking price of $60 million at the start of August. Yet as the window enters its final days, Ugarte remains a possible option for United as Erik ten Hag looks to bolster his options in defensive midfield. Signed by Sporting Lisbon in 2021 to take over from João Palhinha, who joined Fulham, Ugarte excelled as a tough tackling ball winner in Ruben Amorim's 3-4-3 before eventually attracting the attention of PSG and Chelsea. Ugarte is a defensive midfielder who prides himself in how he defends. He combines high athleticism. He can be frighteningly quick in a foot race with defensive intensity when looking to tackle and intercept the ball. Often best in a double pivot working next to a progressive passer, Ugarte can sense an opportunity to regain possession, and if so, he will go hunting for it. He is fond of snapping into tackles should an opponent take a heavy touch of the ball, and he enjoys picking the pockets of attacking players who haven't properly scanned the situation. Ugarte has been more of a piano carrier than a piano player throughout his football career, focusing his game on regaining possession for his team as much as possible before making a simple pass to someone more creative. His hopes for a goal unfortunately remain, just that he has rarely been a consistent goal threat for any of his clubs and boasts only 4 goals in 200 senior club matches. But if you want someone to do the dog work of defending in the middle of the park, there are worse players to turn to than Ugarte. He is a player whose energy lends itself well to warrior-like cult hero status. Ugarte's arrival at PSG coincided with the new managerial regime of Luis Enrique. The Spanish coach, who has worked with defensive midfielders of the caliber of Sergio Busquets and Rodri, is known for favoring a possession-based style of football, one that demands its midfielders be comfortable both receiving and passing the ball under pressure. Ugarte's conservative passing style made him an odd stylistic fit for the manager's approach. He averaged 4.1 progressive passes and 0.7 key passes per 90 in League One, well below the league average for midfielders of 5.4 and 1.2 respectively. In addition to this, his see the ball, try to win the ball approach to defending means he can often be pulled out of position, something that caused difficulties for a manager as detail-oriented as Luis Enrique. He is a young player with character, which is very important for us and that continuity that we need with our positional play. He is one of the surprises at the start of the season. PSG's 2-1 defeat to AC Milan in the Champions League in early November illustrated the mismatch between Ugarte's full-throttle approach to football and Enrique's desire for positional discipline and progressive work in possession. Deployed as the deepest midfielder behind Vitinha and Warren Zaire-Emery, Ugarte was overrun by the clever passing moves of the Italian side, with Ruben Loftus-Cheek and others using 1-2 passing to drag him out of position before attacking the space he had vacated when going after the ball. Ugarte would win only 3 out of his 15 duels that day and was booked for a cynical challenge on Theo Hernandez. He was eventually substituted for Fabian Ruiz on the hour mark. He would feature in only one more Champions League game for PSG that season, with Enrique preferring to use Vitinha, Zaire-Emery, and Fabian Ruiz for every knockout game on the team's run to the semifinals. Beyond the stylistic differences, it is also worth questioning if Ugarte simply struggled to adapt to a more intense top-5 league in general. His defensive numbers with respect to tackle and duel timing seemed to suffer, and he often seemed just a millisecond late to challenge for the ball, giving away fouls like the ones below. In most of these sequences, he either leaves too much space for the defense to cover or makes fouls when the attacker's options are limited. He also looked less confident with the ball at his feet and, while taking players on, moving sideways rather than forward, which resulted in losses of possession, with some of these also leading to shots that were saved by Gianluigi Donnarumma. Ugarte's ball-winning style could see Ten Hag revert to a style of play seen at United in sections of the 2022-23 season. The Uruguay international is a proven ball winner who would go some way to offer some of the defensive security seen in Casemiro, albeit he is not as good in the air, or with the ball at his feet. As there is no outstanding, all-in-one midfield partner for Kobbie Mainoo this summer, Ugarte could be viewed as a provisional defensive midfielder while further funds can be accumulated for a more ideal long-term target in the summers to come. The signings of Joshua Zirkzee and Lenny Yoro give reason to believe United are looking to spend this summer signing younger 25 and under players who marry impressive technical qualities with stronger physical skills. The squad at the close of this summer window may be taller, more assertive, and on a cheaper wage bill than that which came before. Ugarte at United would be a pressing and counter-pressing force from central midfield. Recent signings Matthijs de Ligt and Noussair Mazraoui mean Ten Hag has further options to help with ball progression and build up play in defense. In theory, a back four containing the former Bayern Munich players, along with Lisandro Martinez and Diogo Dalot, should mean Ugarte only has to focus on ball retention and circulation when in possession. In that context, his short sideways passing becomes a help rather than a hindrance. Ugarte's love of defending and pure athleticism should help bolster a United side that has had a soft underbelly in recent years. He also has a fantastic fitness record that should mean he is ready for the marathon-length Premier League season. There is a case to be made for whether Ugarte is best suited to be a destroyer in a relatively lower possession system rather than in one with plenty of possession. Earlier this year, Ugarte spoke about the differences in pace of play under Enrique and his Uruguay head coach Marcelo Bielsa. Bielsa, appointed last May, has replicated the style that brought him praise from English football fans during his time at Leeds United, with an emphasis on speed while moving the ball up the pitch. Ten Hag's side had 56% possession and 31% of their passes went forward. They pressed high up the pitch and averaged 4.8 passes per possession, with most of their attacking touches on the wings 39% on either flank rather than down the middle 22%, which could make Ugarte's conservative passing an asset in build-up. There is no way to tell if this is the approach United will take for the rest of the season. If they move to a system that relies on patient build-up, Ugarte could stick out like a sore thumb. His PSG stint seemed to hint that he did not adequately adapt to the increased pace and physicality of a top-5 league. Some of this may have been stylistic, but it is tough to pinpoint that as the sole reason for his performances. How might he cope with the blood, mud, and thunder of the Premier League? United fans are unlikely to have forgotten the acres of space their opponents could target in midfield last season. The hope is for Ugarte to remedy that, but if he goes ball hunting high up the pitch, those problems may return. United are thought to have considered a number of midfield options to help deputize or even succeed Casemiro in the defensive midfield area. One player under consideration is Sander Berge, who Burnley are prepared to sell, but as The Athletic reported in Tuesday's deal sheet, he now seems to be headed to Fulham. A good defensive midfielder makes a lot of tackles to win the ball back for his side. A great one knows where best to stand on a corner kick to ensure their team is not susceptible to a quick counter. Ineos have made several smart decisions since their minority investment in the club. This summer we'll see how good they are at making difficult ones. Manchester United midfielder Scott McTominay is the subject of plenty of interest this summer as we edge towards transfer deadline day. Napoli's director Giovanni Manna has reportedly traveled to England to continue negotiations with Manchester United for their midfielder Scott McTominay. The Scottish international is a man in demand this summer, having been the subject of 3 bids from Fulham. However, it is widely believed these offers were all rejected because they did not reach United's valuation of the midfielder. Marco Silva's side are now thought to be pursuing a move for Burnley's Sander Berge, who coincidentally was also linked with United this summer. Such interest in the Norwegian is thought to have effectively ended their plans to sign McTominay, who the Reds are needing to sell so as to get PSG's Manuel Ugarte through the door. Fortunately, according to The Athletic, the Reds could be about to make progress on McTominay's departure. It is believed the Italian club's director Manna has arrived in England to continue negotiations with United. It is believed these talks are progressing well, and there is a hope that deal can be agreed. However, despite claims to the contrary, it is not thought that personal terms have been agreed between McTominay and Napoli at this stage. Mensport understands United value McTominay at $40 million this summer. Last year, the Reds rejected a $30 million bid from West Ham for the midfielder. Should McTominay be sold, he would be classified as pure profit in financial fair play terms due to being a product of the academy. Since making the step up to the United senior team in 2017, the 27-year-old has made 254 appearances for the club.